This is the second video on the turtle shell bone, and I have to bring in ink at this point. Now, I had said I would do a pencil drawing, which you see here. There's the side view of the shell, and that is larger, as you can see. I know the pencil looks a little pale, but the reason I'm making a video now is because you would have to do a pencil drawing like this no matter where you head from here. So any drawing you do, well, except for oil painting or acrylic, with those you may want to draw it out on canvas with charcoal. But on a paper drawing, you would have to do this, whether you were going to proceed with colored pencil, marker, ink, pencil, any of them. So there's the basic drawing, but I have to bring in ink. One of the other drawings I'm still finishing, and please don't anybody give me a hard time on how long it's taken me to do this one, is my pear in stippled ink. But let's start at the basics. When I first started doing pen and ink, I bought a Quill dip pen and a bottle of Higgins ink at the hardware store on Martha's Vineyard many years ago, and decided to do black and white drawing at that time. It was after I had my son. I was kind of bored living on the vineyard, and I figured, well, we'll do black and white. So, Higgins Quill, very inexpensive, but guess what the real beauty of this is? And get the Black Magic because that's the most waterproof. Higgins Black Magic. The beauty of this is you have to dip the ink in, and whether you're going to use a rapidograph type pen or a dip pen, you have your drawing here, but you don't necessarily do solid lines. You put your outline in, and you go over this whole pencil drawing with tiny little dots, just on your pencil lines where you have the drawing in. And then, if you proceed in black and white pen and ink, you can either stipple the whole thing, which is more dots to build up shadows and layers, or you can use hatching and cross-hatching, which are lines going in one way and then another way to build up the shadows. So that's one option. Another option is rapidograph pens, and you can change the ink in a pen, changing color, if you want. I find it easier, like on this drawing, I have these 3 pens with ink in them so that I can work 3 different colors at a time. But that type of effect on this turtle shell would be mostly beige, because then you'd be using like a sepia color to do all of this. So this is the stage. When you have your pencil drawing in, this is where you decide exactly what you want the drawing to look like at the end. So I had said I was going to do colored pencil probably over graphite. Now this is a darker drawing than I would normally do for any of these methods. But with ink, if I were to take either of these pens and just do small dots to be where the pencil drawing is, I then take an eraser and erase all the pencil, and I would be left with a polka dot outline of the drawing. And then I take it from there, whether it's in black and white or color. If I'm going to do this in graphite, right at this point, I would erase these lines just a little bit and get them lighter, because this is probably my darkest value. And that line right there is okay, because that is actually a deep line in between 2 areas. But that's shadow. So I have to start light and gradually build up if I'm doing it in graphite. I would do maybe a little bit more defined graphite with some shadowing, and you can see I haven't erased all my lines. I would do a little bit of shadowing and get a feel for the depth, especially through here. Like this is all shadow. I'd put a little bit of graphite in there before I decide whether or not to go ahead with colored pencil. And I would do it very lightly so that the colored pencil will just blend in with that graphite and you won't have either one standing out. And of course you can use like fine line markers and make it more of a graphic design, keeping with the colors. See this area right there, that's a very pale green. So this is where you make these decisions. And I have to take a couple of days, a week. I have to let this just sit there and I think about it, and then I decide which way I'm going to do it. It's partly why the pear is taking so long, because I'm actually thinking about how light do I want this, how filled in do I want the highlights, how dark do I want the whole pear, do I want to change the color to blue. I go through this with all of my drawings, but especially my pen and ink drawings. So this may actually end up being something other than I said in the first video. I don't know yet. But there is the initial drawing, and normally I put down here, I always number them, but obviously I don't number them until they're done. Turtle shell bone, and sometimes I write along here exactly what I used to do it with. But there we are, and now it's time to think about ink. And I highly recommend Quill. Now, the one major problem you have to watch out for with a Quill, and you want to keep a rag handy, is that as you're doing this, the Quill is meant to do a line. So if you use it for stippling, you run the risk of the ink, which is held in the back there, making a blob. And I've ruined a few drawings with a blob showing up all of a sudden. And what I do is I leave it there because it's part of the process. It depends. If it's a commission, then obviously I start over again. But I leave it there and just keep working around it. I would, if you're going to do this, I would practice on like copy paper for at least an hour before you decide to go in and do it on good paper. But Quill is wonderful and inexpensive. I'm not sure where Higgins is made now. So many of these. Made in USA. Now, they're owned, it's made by Chart Pack, which also bought out Kohinoor. But I think the pens are not yet made in the United States, I'm not sure. They used to be made in Germany, I believe. But Hunt's old-fashioned nibs, I believe, are still made in the U.S. You can get those at Dick Blick. So here's your drawing, and when you get to this stage, you really let it sit for a while and think about what do you really want for the finished effect, and what tools will you need.